it housekeeping, and we will shortly take play. So, yes, coming up. You'll be a few seconds behind. I just need to, yes, the volume's off, which is good. YouTube, click on the blog, which is post. And here we go. Is a bright light behind me, isn't it? I can't really do much about it at the moment. I do apologise. But we'll sort that out soon enough. And I've got sorry about looking slightly untidy as well. And here we go. Good evening, Andrew.
Hello.
Hello. I'm already clicking onto live stream now, so we're effectively live literally from the word go, I'm afraid. No.
All right, that's fine. That's fine.
Yeah, hitting the ground running, as it were. So how are you?
I'm pretty good. You?
Yeah, I'm fine. I'm fine. It's been an interesting time, as we know. Not least
that's one way of describing it. Yes.
Yes, especially with the current lockdown. But yes, all's fair, I suppose. So, with regard, how do we start this? I'd suggest mention, because I mean, for those who are watching don't know, the main topic of discussion is about coronavirus and in relation to what's going on in the United States. And what is going on in the United States, because we can't entirely ignore some of the, let's face it, historical events that have happened there this month. For a start, in short, I mean, let's start with the United States in general. How have you found the past month over there, and what has been your reaction?
Well, I was never a fan of Donald Trump. I mean, never from the start. I couldn't work out what people actually saw in him. Some people describe him as a narcissist. I'd say he was a sociopath. He just will destroy anything and everything to get his own way, because it's all about him. Now, I mean, having said that, not everything that Donald Trump has done has been wrong. I think his robust stance with China has been right, and that's going to continue with the Biden administration. But I just couldn't believe. I mean, the 6th of January was just incredible.
Yeah.
I mean, clearly, him and people like Rudy Giuliani fired up a crowd, giving them false information that Mike Pence could reverse the decision and not endorse Joe Biden, that he could send it back to the States, when clearly he couldn't do it, and then sent away a lot of angry people to demonstrate. Now, I'm not saying that he told them to be violent, but he certainly told them to storm the Capitol without a doubt. I don't think that's in any doubt. And it was just completely shocking scenes. I mean, I was glued to my TV when all that was happening. And you think, well, this is the United States of America. This is a country. I mean, I think it was Ronald Reagan said this, and someone mentioned it in one of the speeches before Joe Biden was inaugurated, that an inauguration is commonplace and a miracle. It's commonplace because we've been doing it every 4 years since 1789. It's a miracle because we've been doing this every 4 years since 1789. And the fact that Donald Trump would just try to override that completely, fix it all, get rid of an attorney general, put a new law officer in, or whatever it happens to be, and just completely reverse the decision. That was his intent. And this is the United States in 2021. Very, very shocking.
It is. I have to say, I mean, it's one of those things where I remember where it was when it happened. And it was it's one of those rare events in our lifetimes where you're watching history unfold in front of you. And I was literally sitting just an inch away from where I am, and I was at the same table, and I was writing up a blog post, and I had the TV on in the background on silent because I knew obviously the votes were crucial and there's demonstration. Next thing I see is a huge crowd outside Capitol Hill. It's like, uh-oh, this does not look good. And then my jaw dropping as it got worse as you see people walking through the Capitol. And I honestly thought I was seeing a coup starting to take place for a short while before common sense kicked in, because it just felt like a coup. And you know, in spite of security and everything, being very concerned for the senators and the representatives inside.
Well, I think it was an attempted coup, actually, in some ways.
Yeah,
Paul.
yeah.
I mean, I think those.
I felt it was more full on than it actually.
Yeah, well, yeah.
But I mean,
No.
Sorry.
Go ahead. Sorry.
No.
This is the problem with Zoom, isn't it? You don't always know when to interject. You go.
It's about 2 or 3 second difference, isn't it? What struck me, what unnerved me, was you had at least the second, third, and fourth in line of the presidential succession in that building. In what? And Donald Trump saying, "Go home, we love you." It was the second time in Trump's presidency where I seriously wondered whether it was worth kicking in the 25th Amendment.
Well, it was a possibility for a while, wasn't it?
It was.
But I mean, with 2 weeks to go, how much more trouble could he create? Well, I think actually, despite all the pardons, of which there were many, especially to a lot of his friends and associates, he didn't really do much. I do think that the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, if I remember rightly, said, "Yeah, no, you may have the nuclear codes, but nothing's going to get launched unless I say so."
I heard the Pentagon had, when it was clear that Trump hadn't immediately called in the National Guard, the Pentagon got hold of the Vice President, the Speaker of the House of Representatives, and the Senate Minority Leader and the Senate Majority Leader, and consulted them rather than the President. That tells you how bad things have gone. And thank God he is no longer in office and no further damage was done.
Well, I have a theory, though, Paul, that Mike Pence had a frank conversation with Donald Trump.
Yeah.
And probably promised not to invoke the 25th Amendment, not try to get support for that, as long as he piped it down and kept and didn't rock the boat too much, because he didn't really much after that. And of course, he did say that all of this is wrong, and engaging in this sort of violence means you're not a supporter of mine, etc., etc. But that was all looking at his impeachment trial, wasn't it?
Yeah, I mean, it did look like that someone had a conversation, because he was making uncharacteristic, subdued comments. But how do you see the Republican Party now?
Well, it's not the party of Ronald Reagan, is it? No. I mean, that's the thing. It's very split. I mean, the Democratic Party is split, but no, not to the sheer extent that the Republican Party is. And I think it all depends on how long that Donald Trump has keeps his popularity. I mean, he seems to be very popular now. And I read something in the Washington Post earlier today where this Republican congressman from Florida has flown to Wyoming and organized a demonstration against what's her name again? Liz Cheney, Dick Cheney's daughter. Yeah. And there seems to be a lot of anger in Wyoming. I mean, this was the Washington Post. It's not exactly right-leaning, shall we say. And this reporter couldn't find anybody who really wanted to defend Liz Cheney at all. So there is a lot of anger there. But of course, if Trump has problems in New York State through the courts, then it's a completely different thing. I mean, it's not an impossibility that Donald Trump could be serving a sentence in a year or two's time. So we just don't know.
Where do you think the Republican? I mean, do you find it concerning the fact that the impeachment's now gone to the Senate and 45 Republican senators objected? Because you don't have to get maths to know that means that it won't go through.
Well, the Republican senators, like all representatives on Capitol Hill, are terrified of having to face hostile primaries if they go against Trump. I mean, that's their overriding position. As far as the trial is concerned, I don't know why it's happening, to be honest, because we know what the outcome is going to be. We know that 17 Republican senators are not going to side with the Democrats.
No.
That's assuming, well, I probably can assume that 50 Democrats will vote in favor.
Yeah. What about the principle, though? I mean,
well, it's a principle. Yeah, I agree. There is a principle there. I do agree with that. But I did read, I think it was earlier this week, well, we can do this trial, no problem. What we'll do is we'll go through confirmation hearings in the morning. We'll have an impeachment trial in the afternoon. And then in the evening, we'll go through other legislation. I'm thinking, well, how many hours in the day are there? I mean, do you expect senators to be in from 9 o'clock till 11, get back and do that for a couple of weeks?
Yeah.
I just think it's the important thing from, if I was looking at this from a Democratic Party point of view,
yeah,
get a motion of censure through, knowing that you're not going to win the impeachment trial, and concentrate on the important stuff, which is getting these confirmations of senior positions and making sure that things like the $1.9 trillion stimulus is going to go through, which it's not going to, by the way. It's going to be much more. It's going to be much smaller than that.
which is all well and good, but for one problem. I think what's been happening in Congress isn't just over what's happened in the past month. If you look back over the last 6 months, if you look at when the death of Ruth Bader Ginsburg and the push through of her successor, there is a sense perhaps that Democrats no longer feel they can trust Republicans on matters of bipartisanship. Now that's deeply concerning because you do need, in any parliamentary system that works, a fair degree of mutual trust between the main parties. And unfortunately, I can't see that at the moment. And I'm afraid to say for very good reasons.
Well, they're squabbling away now, aren't they? I mean, the relationship between the Republicans and Democrats, and certainly in the House of Representatives, is getting pretty much to an all-time low. I think fistfights have almost broken out on the floor. You're right to mention the time after Ruth Bader Ginsburg died, because I mean they were trying to put a nomination in. I mean, about 3 days after she died, it was before her funeral.
Yeah.
I mean, it was tacky, to say the least.
Yeah.
And so I can understand why Democrats don't, but believe me, I think the Democrats are just going to get on with doing what their day job is, and supporting President Biden. As for the Republicans, the party that I would normally support, well, God, they've got one hell of an uphill task. I mean, Trump's all over the place. He's registered this Patriot Party within a week of leaving office. And then he's saying he's not going to do anything with it. He's trying to distance himself from that party. He's out saying he's going to be supporting Republicans in the midterms. You've had Kevin McCarthy, the minority leader in the House, go down to Mar-a-Lago and see him. It's all over the place, isn't it? And they've got to get over this, because the reason why they lost, even though Donald Trump pulled more votes than any other Republican nominee and still lost, was because of his divisiveness. And I think you can pinpoint it back. I mean, you can pinpoint it a long way back, but I think a tipping point, certainly, Paul, was that first presidential debate where Donald Trump was just absolutely and utterly obnoxious.
Yeah,
and he didn't try and debate the issues.
Yeah, I thought the worst bit, and the bit where I was surprised Joe Biden didn't hit him, which shows how low it got, was when he made comments about his sons when Biden was trying to talk about the death of his son Beau from cancer, and the way Trump responded. Biden was very good to keep his cool. I mean, I wouldn't have hit Trump, but I think I would have said something very, very nasty if I felt someone had said something about the death of someone close to me in that obnoxious a manner. So,
yeah, me too. Yeah. Me too. So yeah, I think it lost Trump a lot of support, and of course, you know, the leadership on the Hill, the Republican leadership on the Hill, is blaming Donald Trump for the loss of the 2 Senate seats in Georgia.
Yes,
and his behaviour, and I think that's a reasonable accusation. I would never have thought that Georgia would have returned, two Democratic senators. There was a possibility of one, but not two. That didn't look likely, did it?
I mean, as a quick aside, before I mention something else, part of me is very happy for Jimmy Carter because it hasn't. Are you still there, Andrew? Your screen's frozen. Andrew? Oh, heck. Ladies and gentlemen, I don't know quite what's happened here or quite what to do at this stage. I'm hoping, Andrew, if you can hear me, I'd suggest you log out and log in again. Oh dear, this is just about to first here. We've had one or two freeze outs on this before, but usually in a group discussion, not when it's two people talking. But I will, yes, he has done it. He is logged out and he will log in again. So I'm going to keep talking for the time being. I was referring, of course, to Jimmy Carter. And if my understanding is there have been Democrat senators in Georgia for decades. So there's a part of me that's very glad that he's lived to see this happen. And hopefully, yeah. And is he logging in? I'm going to keep talking for a minute or two before I get hold of him, because I think that's what he's doing. He'll log back in. If he doesn't log in a minute or two, I'll have to chase him up and find out what's going on. And yes, hang on, there's no sign so far, but oh dear, oh well. But yeah, just quickly, we'll continue. I mean, obviously, it's a difficult time in the United States. It's very difficult situation. What I was going to ask Andrew was whether he thinks the Republican Party will recover easily enough and move beyond Donald Trump. But I will ask him if he comes up again in the next minute. My throat's getting dry, which wine might not be a good thing for, but it's the only immediate drink to get hold of here. Not here, but I mean this room right now. But so yes, and it's 8:15. I will just quickly send him a message. So just bear with me. And just send him a quick message via the message group on Twitter. There's nothing on the screen to say that he's signing in. Oh dear. Oh, barely a third of the way, just about a third of the way through this, and so I'll keep going for now, because I did want to also discuss the coronavirus. Oh, hang on. No. Well, I'll keep going. I did also want to discuss the coronavirus and Trump's mishandling of the coronavirus. Hang on. I forgot something here. No, nothing new. Ah, here we are. At last. Oh, welcome back.
Well, what happened there? I've got no idea.
Your screen just froze from where we were, from the viewer's perspective, and I just had to keep talking for 3 minutes. But
oh, that's good. That's good. I've actually logged into my neighbour's Wi-Fi. That's not illegal, by the way. She allows me to do it when we have problems with ours. So.
Yeah, sometimes goes kaput, but usually very late at night. So we are fairly safe here. But it's almost like those old days. Do you remember growing up watching a program on BBC Two or BBC One, and the program would get break, and then you would get a continuity announcer and a clock and music playing for 2 or 3 minutes. So
I do remember.
but,
I tell you, there's one person I've been meaning to mention, which is Marjorie Taylor Greene,
Yes.
who's the newly elected congresswoman for the 14th district in Georgia. Sorry, I've got a child who doesn't want to go to sleep behind. You'll probably hear them screaming.
Yeah.
I mean, she's a complete and utter.
Yeah.
Well, I'd like to say unhinged, but I mean a loony. I mean, she believes that some of these school shootings were a setup and they didn't really happen.
Yeah.
She once said or spread around the conspiracy theory that Hillary Clinton murdered a child in some satanic cult.
Yeah.
And drank the little girl's blood. And this woman has actually been elected.
And she also made comments about potential assassinations as well.
She did, yes.
And I'm choosing some of my words carefully because obviously with stuff going out there, you have to be careful about what's accurate and what isn't. But choosing my words, from what I understand, from what I've read, she called for the assassination of some senior Democratic figures, which
She certainly liked tweets, Paul. She's liked. I know for a fact she's liked a tweet that said a bullet should go through Nancy Pelosi's head. So I mean, this is very serious.
And from what she said the other day, she doesn't feel entirely safe, understandably, with some of her. And this is the Speaker of the House of Representatives. I mean, could you imagine the Speaker of the House of Commons having to deal with that from some of our MPs? It is absolutely shocking. Absolutely.
Well, actually, could you imagine the Metropolitan Police standing by and allowing a violent mob to enter Parliament and trash the Speaker's office?
They would have.
I mean,
they would have quickly. It would have been. They were literally, the security was there. I mean, they did have security there, but what shocked me was the security around Capitol Hill was far less around the House of Parliament. Now, I'm sure you've been to the House of Parliament a number of times, as have I. And if you compare the first time you've been to the last time you've been, the security is like. I mean, I'll say the first time I went there was in 2000. And it was just the only security I went through St. Stephen's entrance, airport security, put your bags here, walk through this. That was it. Nowadays, walk down pathway past Cromwell statue, literally airport security, queue of baggages, prepare to be searched, 2 or 3 things. You go through. If someone thinks you're not walking with a purpose, you get asked. When you sit in the gallery of the House of Commons, you've got screens all around because of one group of people thought it was clever to throw purple dyeing condoms on the chamber into the floor of the chamber. So the security is sky high compared to.
Oh, it is. I mean, I remember the first time I ever went in with my father. It would have been about 1985, maybe, about that sort of time. And you are right, you walk through St. Stephen's entrance, and there was a bit of a scatter there, but golly, it was nothing like it is now. Well, I'm pleased you're having a glass of wine as well. I'll join you.
My responsibility, but I mean, it was Friday evening, so
Well, that's what I was thinking as well. Yeah. So yeah, you just walked in. It was pretty low key. In fact, I can even remember in the 1970s. So this would be when Callaghan was Prime Minister. Yeah. Very hazy memory, but actually walking down Downing Street.
Yeah.
I mean, it was there. You could do it.
I have a memory. I'm not sure. I lived in Oxfordshire in the early 80s, and we drove through. I lived in Oxfordshire at the time. Funnily enough, in Enstone, which I mention frequently enough because I'm still amazed that Theresa May spent part of her childhood in the same village. And we went on a primary school there, went on a school trip to Tower of London. And I'm sure we drove through Downing Street. And I don't know whether memory's playing tricks on me, because I know it was round about that time they put in the barriers.
They did. They did. But certainly this would have been about 1978, I would think. About that time.
Yeah.
And yeah, I walked down Downing Street with my parents without a doubt and said hello to the policeman at the door, as a kid would. Yeah. It was so much more relaxed. And yet this is what it has been, actually. Getting back to American politics, this is capital. And it's been much more relaxed, much less security than there is in London. But now that's all going to change completely, isn't it? Well, it has.
It is, and rightly so. And I mean, the fact that some of the congressmen, including the one you mentioned, I think, complaining about having to go through barriers so that they, you know, they can't carry guns into the legislature. I mean, where do they? I mean, that's the sort of thing I would have read about in Northern Ireland 20 years ago. Not, you know, that's the only case I can compare in the British
I
Isles.
know.
It's ridiculous. But I wanted one of the things I
Yeah,
wanted to.
there was a congresswoman. Go, yeah, go. I
Yeah, I
was
was
just going to
going.
say, can I just say this? There is a
Yeah.
congresswoman from Colorado she was the real culprit. She insisted on taking her Glock into the chamber of the House of Representatives.
Is that Lauren Boebert?
I think it is. I can't. I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Mm.
God, it's incredible, isn't it? But one thing I want to touch on, do you think the Republican Party will be able to survive Trump? Do you think they will be able to ideologically wrest the party from him? Because he is effectively still the leader of the party. I mean, I know they don't have leaders per se, but effectively he is the leader.
Well, yeah. So the former presidents do well. Former presidents usually disappear into the background a little bit, especially after they've been defeated. But we know that Trump won't do that. I was thinking just a couple of days ago. There's a lot of similarities here between what the Republican Party is going through and what the Labour Party has gone through in the UK. Let's look at sort of lots of similarities. I mean, Jeremy Corbyn's supporters, his fan base, treat him like a messiah, and that's exactly what Trump's fan base does then. They also both of them actually had a habit of condemning all violence. You know, I mean, Hamas could blow a bunch of minibus up in Tel Aviv or something like that, and he would condemn all violence, Jeremy Corbyn. And if you remember at Charlottesville in 2017, Trump came under fire because he was condemning all violence rather than the vicious sort of KKK white supremacists who were doing that. And both of them really got control of their party. Now, Keir Starmer has gradually, bit by bit, tried to remove the Corbynistas from any position of responsibility inside the Labour Party. And I wouldn't, if I was a Republican senator, if I was Mitch McConnell, shall we say, I wouldn't trust Trump at all to stick to his word on anything. I mean, they could back him to the hilt, and then all of a sudden he launches his new party and he goes as a third party candidate. So I think that those, what we'll term now, moderate Republican voices on the Hill, they need to think, and they have to act within about the next 6 months. Because, you know, once you start getting into next year, into primary season again, election fever comes in. And they have to really decide what they want for their party. And there's going to be a lot of people who say, well, we're not going to support the Republicans anymore because it's not the party of Trump. But, you know, the GOP has survived for a lot of years. You know, I suppose really the first leader of the Republican Party was Abraham Lincoln. It's survived for a hell of a lot of years, and it still can under the right leadership.
I can see it. I mean, I had doubts about Labour, and I was proved wrong. And I mean, I don't regret leaving the Labour Party 2 years ago because I felt I had gone as far as I could, and I could not go any further without, you know, feeling the sense of moral compromise. But I am pleased. It's now got to the stage with Labour where I don't feel comfortable enough joining it yet, but I am comfortable enough at the thinking of voting for them. But at the same time, that gives me a sense of hope for the Republican Party. Now, you might find that strange, or some of the viewers might find it strange, that someone like me with my politics, which are firmly in the centre, sort of right-wing Labour, would be wanting the Republican Party to do well. But, you know, as you said, the party was founded by Lincoln. And there are many Republicans in the history of the United States, Republican presidents who one can respect. And, you know, the early ones you could agree with, perhaps the later ones less, but you could respect, like Lincoln, it's the party of Teddy Roosevelt, it's the party of Calvin Coolidge. And it's the party of Dwight Eisenhower.
Yes.
Gerald Ford, who is actually the last Republican president I have immense respect for in terms of legislature. Reagan, I liked as a person, but I disagreed with a great deal on his politics.
Well, yeah, you would. Of
Yeah,
course, I liked him very much for that. You know,
I know
yeah,
what you
yeah.
mean. But there was some kind of respect there. I don't like some of what has been said recently with regards to unearthing of tapes with Nixon, with regards to racism. But generally, I found over the years I liked Ronald Reagan and respected him. I respected George H.W. Bush. And so I do want the Republican Party to do well. I do want Republican presidents who I know again, George W. Bush was someone I didn't like his politics, especially over Iraq. But I liked him. I've always liked him as a person. And you want Republican presidents, from a left wing perspective, who you can respect, just as I'm sure you'd want to see Democrat presidents who you can respect.
But you also need those two strong parties as well, because democracy
Yeah.
depends on it. Otherwise, it becomes a dictatorship. You need strong parties.
Yes.
It's the same over here. I mean, I may disagree with many Labour Party policies, but at the same time, I do respect the party being there for 100 years. It's been a successful party. It's been a party of Clement Attlee,
Yes.
and some of the great. I mean, look at the cabinets. For example, Margaret Thatcher's cabinet in 1979. You look at the amount of heavyweights that were in there.
Yeah.
And then you looked at all the turmoil that was going on in the Labour Party, and you looked at the Gang of Four, who were all heavyweights. I mean, there were some real statesmen and women on either side. And I don't think we've got that particularly now. I might be going slightly off topic here, but I don't think we've particularly got that now. And I look at many of the cabinet that we've got now, and I don't think that we've even made Under Secretary of State as with Margaret Thatcher as Prime Minister.
And I mean, just as a quick aside to what I said before moving back to America, when I'm always fascinated by the first ballot after Wilson resigned. Each one of those 6 candidates, and I don't even know ideologically agree with all of them, such as Tony Benn, but all of them were heavyweights. All 6
They were.
candidates, even Tony Crossland, who came in 6th place with 17 votes. I don't think I've ever seen anything like it, where so many candidates and all of them were successful heavyweights in the Labour Party or in any main party in their own right. But I mean, going to America and going, because the other subject we're going to discuss this evening is the coronavirus. Do you think a lot of the problems in the US with the coronavirus are down to the Trump administration and his mishandling? I mean, would you say
well, to a certain extent, but it's also the system, isn't it? They've got a federal system there where the states have so much power. I mean, domestically, the President of the United States doesn't have a great deal of power, nowhere near as much power as the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, well, or the Prime Minister has in England, certainly, now after devolution. But clearly, I mean, he was completely out of his depth. All the messaging was wrong, wasn't it? From drinking bleach and
That was the first time. That was the drinking bleach incident. Was the first time I actually picked up, because my wife, probably from her studies in the US, because her parents lived in Minnesota for a number of years, had a copy of the US Constitution, which we got. So that was the first time. I mean, I browsed for it, but that was the first time I actually picked it up and read the 25th Amendment from beginning to end with great care, because the bleach comment was so out there. I honestly wondered, have we got a president who's lost his mind?
Well, that's right. And he kept constantly undermining his officials. Well, I think that Boris has probably trusted some of them too much, but Trump was completely the other way and tried to undermine them. So yeah, I mean, a lot of the problems they've got at the moment is because of the Trump presidency. I mean, it's looking now that the vaccine rollout's looking pretty good, pretty decent now. But there again, it probably always was going to be. It wasn't quite as bad as what Joe Biden would have made out. It was starting to get there. But certainly all these pledges. I can't remember what the figure was. How many did they say? 20 million people vaccinated by the end of last year. And I think about 2.5 million have been vaccinated or something like that. Please don't quote the audience on that. You'd have to check it up yourself. But it was a massively low figure. It was nowhere near the target what Trump was promising.
Yeah. I think you always, I mean, this is part of the problem. I do think whenever something goes that, I always think you've got to aim low with the figure and give a lesser figure than you're hoping for, because you don't want to, because I'm sure that I'm not saying Trump did. I think sometimes when others, in any country world said this is how many vaccines they want to get out, they genuinely believe they can do that. But of course, like any other thing, when you plan it, it doesn't come out the way that you think. It could easily, circumstances happen. But yeah,
Well, it's under promising over delivering, as they call it. Yeah.
It is, and there is a problem at the moment with the EU with that. And it will surprise you to hear from me that I'm not entirely happy with the EU in that at the moment. As someone who's unashamedly voted for Remain in 2016, but I do think there's a lot to be positive about it, and I do think that we will be able to get something done. I mean, certainly in the US, the next 6 months are going to be crucial. I don't envy Joe Biden at all. I don't envy him. He's come in on a difficult situation. But I think anything he does in dealing with the coronavirus in the US has got to be better than what has been done.
Yeah, but you've also got to remember there are tens of millions of Americans who think that he's an illegitimate president, that the election was stolen from Trump, and they genuinely believe it.
Mm.
So and they are tens of millions. And if you look at the polls, it's the majority of Republican voters.
Mm.
That's a serious problem for him from the start.
It is, but it's not what the majority of voters think. But it is a problem, and it goes back to the Republican Party as a big problem. I don't.
Oh, it has.
I honestly don't know how I think America has got itself into an awful mess that we have not seen in any of our lifetimes. And I'm not just talking about you and me. I'm talking about anyone watching this from the age of, no matter how young or how old they are. I don't think we have seen anything like this. And the next few years are going to be crucial as to how the Republican Party survive. Because if the Republican Party to survive, if it doesn't survive, either it splits, which is the next best thing, or things get very, very nasty. And so it has to come.
Well, it does have to, but it's got to focus now on the midterms. Now, the Democrats did very poorly in the midterms for the House of Representatives.
Yeah.
They lost quite a few seats. There's now, I think, they're about 10 ahead, I think.
Republicans did better in the midterms last time. Because the Democrats
well, they did
the House in 2018.
That's right, but they did. Everyone expected the Democrats to do better.
I see what you mean.
In the House elections, and they didn't. So the Republicans have got to think, well, this is within our grasp, and in the 2022 midterms, the House is within our grasp, and I would wager as well. I mean, this is going to be on YouTube forever, so people can look back and see if my predictions are right. But I cannot see there being a 50-50 split in the Senate. I think the Republicans will take back the Senate in 2022 if they play the cards right. They can do it. They can actually take back. Yes, they can actually. It's within their grasp to take back both the House and the Senate. And if they do that, well, they'll just completely derail the second half of Biden's administration. Pretty much what they did back in 2010 to 2012. Well, with Obama. So it's certainly within their grasp. They just got to get their act together.
Yeah. I think part of the concern I have is how they get their act together, because they can easily be very united behind Trump. It's how they public see that and how things are. So Biden has got to, for his first 2 years, got to really hit the ground running and really work at getting the public on side. Now, I actually think he has a better chance of doing that than any other senior Democrat. I think he's able to reach out in ways that, say, Nancy Pelosi can't, that senators like Chuck Schumer or Bernie Sanders or Cory Booker or any of them, talented as they all are, can't, reach out in the way Joe Biden can. Joe Biden is not someone who I'd say is one of my favorite all-time presidential candidates, but I think he's the right person at the right moment. I think sometimes we get that politicians.
Well, at John McCain's funeral, I mean, he gave a eulogy, and from memory, he said something like, "I'm Joe Biden, and I'm a Democrat, and I love John McCain."
Yeah,
And him and John McCain used to work together. I mean, they were the two, weren't they, from the Democrats and the Republican side, who would try and reach compromise across the aisle. And he's certainly done that. But also, the Senate, though, has changed a lot since he was last there. I think we've got to remember that. I mean, he was last in the Senate 12 years ago. It's changed a lot since he was last there. He's got a lot of old friends, yes. But it's not the same Senate. And also, I mean, for my problem with Joe Biden, I'm trying to be ageist here, or anything like that. But look at some leaders after they spent 8 or 10 years in office, they look like they've aged about 20 years. The responsibility of the office is enormous. Is he going to make it to the end of his term? And I still can't see him at 82 years old trying to stand for a second term.
I've taken it for granted. I've never taken seriously him standing for a second term. My understanding is he's always planned to do one term and get out. And
I think he's going to have to. But also, just looking at the age thing here as well. I mean, as I said, I don't want to appear ageist or anything, but Nancy Pelosi is 80. She's 80 years old and Speaker of the House of Representatives. Mitch McConnell's about 75, 76. So that sort of thing, you know. So there's going to be some new leadership coming through on both sides.
Yeah.
You know, but particularly the Democrats, I think. I mean, during the primaries, I mean, you didn't have to be a septuagenarian to stand as a Democratic candidate, but it certainly helped, didn't it? There was about 5 of them. Elizabeth Warren was the youngest at the age of 70.
Well, you did have some young ones in the primaries. I mean, Kamala Harris was gets in the car. Cory Booker was in the car. Was it Joaquin or Julian Castro? I find it very hard to tell those twins apart. I think it was Julian. Joaquin is the congressman, so I think it was him. Julian, no, it was Julian. Joaquin's the congressman for Texas, but Julian was the one who was mayor of San Antonio and then was in Obama's cabinet, Secretary for Housing. And if I remember, it was Julian.
Right.
And I think Julian Castro. So I mean, they are there. And
they're there, but they just didn't get anywhere.
Yeah.
You know, the last 5 were all septuagenarians.
Yeah.
It was just incredible. But you're right, they are there. But the point I'm trying to make is there will be a change of leadership. I mean, I don't think Nancy Pelosi would. Well, I think it's part of the agreement. She's not going to seek another term as Speaker. No. So in 2 years' time, she's going to stand down. She's going to be 81, 82 at that point. Mitch McConnell is going to have to stand down before too long as the Senate minority leader. Joe Biden, as you said quite rightly, is not going to run for that second term. I just can't see it happening, which probably puts Kamala Harris in pole position to win the nomination. If indeed, you know, Joe Biden, anything could happen to Joe Biden. I'm not wishing anything to happen on him, but anything could happen. You know, between now.
He's the oldest person to hold the office, and let's face it, men far younger than him, even making allowances for the huge changes in medicine, died in office from natural causes. And I mean, even presidents younger than he is now after they left office, and that, you know, I mean, Franklin D. Roosevelt, when he died, he was 63, I think, or 62 when he died. And he if you look at I'm always struck by those photos of him at Yalta weeks before he died, where he looks far older each year. So, I mean, you are right. But I do.
Well, though he did have polio as well, so, you know, that.
Yeah. But he did. Joe Biden does have a strong team around him. And I think they will help come through. Who do you think? Are there any Republicans who you think will have the guts to stand against Trumpism and make a bid for the presidency?
Well, if they're around, they're not exactly making their voices heard at the moment.
No,
but I'm sure they will.
Yeah.
I mean, Kevin McCarthy, who I've mentioned, the minority leader in the House, is an ambitious so-and-so. I don't think I particularly trust him. but he's certainly ambitious.
I don't.
But I don't know what. I think he might just want to become speaker.
Yeah.
That might just be it. He might not have any presidential hopes, but I mean, so many of them I just dislike. I've got to be honest. Ted Cruz, for example. I mean, I can't stand. He's odious. And yet he's someone who always seems to be around and will always be sort of wanting to champing at the bit to try and go there.
I don't respect someone who, after Trump made allegations about his father and the Kennedy assassination, and then made nasty comments about his wife, and at the time said to Trump, you know, that's low, you have a problem, you come to me. And then within months is effectively licking Trump's feet. And even now is making excuses for him. I have very great difficulty respecting people who are like that. Because
I agree. Lying Teddy called him, didn't he?
Yeah. And I mean, this is the problem, I think, with some. They just show. Which do you prefer? Do you prefer, you know, I'm not saying to you, I'm saying, you know, about what I would say to them. Which do you prefer? Kowtowing to Trump or upholding the Constitution of the United States and upholding and having loyalty to your country? Because there are moments where it is not, both are in conflict. I mean, you mentioned Kevin McCarthy. I was disgusted today to see him go to Mar-a-Lago and kiss the ring of Trump. I really was. It was pretty after everything that's happened on January the 6th. You know, I thought we've not many, but we've got some Republicans who've developed some backbone. I mean, Lindsey,
ambitious, Paul. He's ambitious. I mean, that's it. And he's thinking, well, if Trump's going to remain popular, I want Trump's support, then maybe I can go for it. He certainly would like to be speaker. He may want to be president. I don't know, but he's certainly an ambitious man, albeit slimy.
But yeah, it is kind of. Where do you think American politics went wrong? Because it's gone really wrong somewhere.
Well, I genuinely think that the Democratic Party took its base for granted. And certainly when we went through globalism, and a lot of those communities in the Rust Belt were left behind, without a doubt. And I don't think they were looked after as well as they could have been. I think that certainly was a problem. I mean, Trump just caught the wave, didn't he? That's at exactly the right time. It's hard to pinpoint. I think it's been going wrong for a lot of years. And I think faith in the whole system has been going wrong for a lot of years. Probably a good 20 years. I think when Clinton left, everything was, you know, economically pretty decent and things were fine. But then you went through the Bush 43 years, and everything started to really decline, and it was ending in the financial crash that Obama then had to take on, and things have never really recovered.
Hello. Yeah,
I think the same in.
Yeah, I mean, I can see stages that happened. For example, with the Newt Gingrich versus Bill Clinton era, you can see that the beginnings of such a change. I could see it. Some of the difficulties around Iraq, perhaps. Certainly, during I did get to see some of the concerns during when Obama went for his second term. I remember there was a degree of unpleasantness, but once Trump came on the scene, it just really, you know, exploded, and it's got worse and worse. I now have genuine concerns about American democracy that I didn't even have when Trump was first elected. But yeah, it's all.
Well, no, that's true. That's true. Things have been going wrong for a long time, and then you get an explosive person like Trump coming along, and of course it's just probably accelerated the process. I think we're always going to get here, but it's going to be gradual and a lot more civilized. And then Trump just accelerated it. I mean, do you remember his inauguration speech?
Weird speech.
I mean, it was talk about not having any magnanimity in
Yeah, I chiefly remember not so much the speech, but from what I heard that George W. Bush afterwards turned to Hillary Clinton and said that was some weird expletive. And Hillary Clinton went, yeah, it was. I mean, which says, says something about, again, something that needs to be mentioned about Trump. None of his predecessors respect him. They've made it very clear that they, you know, Republican and Democrat. But I notice we're
very much
into our allotted time of about 45 minutes. We
have, haven't we?
We've gone through this very quickly, which is not a bad thing at all. But we didn't talk so much about the coronavirus, but I think we did touch on it, and we did touch on American politics. I don't think we've solved anything, and I think in some cases we've been more in agreement than disagreement. Perhaps sometimes agreeing from opposite ends of the argument. But it has been good to chat with you on this, and I hope we get to do more of these. And I hope you have a good weekend.
Yes, you too, Paul. As you said, we probably have more problems, but I think both of us like civility in politics, where people could agree and disagree, and it doesn't make any difference. You can still be friends, and that's what's lacking at the moment, and that's what we need to get back to.
Indeed. Well, have a good weekend, and I do envy your cat because it's so most chilled out cat I've ever seen. Anyway, have a good weekend. Thank you.
Cheers. Yes, you too, Paul. Thank you.